What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Mark II build. This is going to be episode 2 of our series. In the last episode, you guys kind of saw us go over the vehicle and give you some brief overview of what we're going to be doing. But in this episode, we're going to be installing some of the Autobahn AutoWorks parts and our carb kit and just check fitment and see how the routing is going to be for this new wiring harness that we're going to be installing. Once we get done with that, we're going to be moving into the interior of the vehicle where we're going to be disassembling some of the body panels on the inside just so we can gain access to the fuse panel and run our new harness through the firewall. All right, so we're back at the workbench, and if you guys have been following my socials at all, you would have seen that on one of my posts, we started installing the trigger ring onto the new billet pulley. We also went ahead and wired and pinned our crank sensor. This is going to be a VR type sensor for the kit. And then we're going to have to make some adjustments when we install these brackets. I think we got to get about 1 millimeter from the edge of this sensor to the face of the trigger wheel here. But before we put that in, we're going to go ahead and change out the connector on the carb manifold for the TPMS. That way we can service it easier and have a nice Deutsch connector on it that's waterproof. It'll tie in really nice with the harness that we're doing. All right, so we got the new connector on, and I ran some sheathing through here, some marine heat shrink here, just because it's got the glue in it and it kind of helps seal that up a little bit more. Got the locking portion on the inside. We'll go ahead and get this guy on and see how it fits. All right, let's get this manifold on. Really worried this is not gonna work with the current setup. Oh man, already running into our first fitment issue, I think. Yep, looks like we're contacting right about here. I could destroy this really nice piece, but it's looking like I might have to go back to the factory plastic one for now. Damn, that sucks. But hey, it's all part of building cars. I'll just pop this guy back off, get this manifold on, continue with the test fitment. All right, so we're back over here at the bench. We got the carbs back on the table. Flip these guys over. Now you guys can kind of see all the butterfly flaps in here, but we're going to be installing all these silicon couplers and the clamps to one side before we put it on the car, because according to their video, it makes it so much easier to just go ahead and put these guys on here and get them clamped down. Now we do have to keep in mind the actuation of the throttle linkage itself. Once it gets to about here, could have a chance of an interference. So we're gonna make sure that we get all of these band clamps somewhat in an orientation where it's not gonna smack this guy. All right, so we got the silicon couplers on. We got them clamped down to the carb assembly. We have some clearance with the throttle, which is nice. I was kind of worried about that with how I had to keep playing with these to get them in the right orientation. That's the manual choke. So you needed to make sure that's still moved. And with these being so close, I was worried, but got everything nice and tight, and now we can test fit it on the car and see if that fitment issue we were having with the coolant flange is still going to be an issue. If so, looks like I'm gonna have to be ordering some more parts. All right, so let's go test fit this thing. So the first time I put this thing on, I put it on upside down. Kind of have to finagle it a little bit. Oh, look at that. Like a glove. I actually really like that. So that's just gonna live there like this. We'll have the throttle cable coming over. The feed is on the bottom. There is no return in the system. This guy is just a vent. So we'll probably end up taking these nipples off and just leaving these exposed. Still got to make our nice plate that goes on here to hold the filters, but it's starting to look like I'm running out of room, especially with this radiator the way it is, which I believe the new radiator is a bit thicker of a core, so we'll have to play with that. Let's snake it in there and see. If this guy will fit. Obviously, you guys saw that other fitment issue I was having with the manifold. Yeah, it's actually contacting the bowl here on the bottom of the carburetors. So it's looking like I'm gonna have to run the shorty that comes straight out, which is not the end of the world. I did really like this piece, but I'm sure this will live on in someone else's car. It's a bummer. All right, guys, so we've been test fitting some stuff over here. We got the carburetors in, ran into a fitment issue there, like you guys saw. We got this block off plate here for the distributor. And then these guys, gonna have to tidy them up somehow. And we'll put this guy, this MSD coil, somewhere around here. I'll have to make a 3D printed bracket for it to hold it. That way it kind of keeps everything nice and tidy. We can have the connector down here at the bottom, but this kind of gives me an idea for the routing on the engine bay side. Now the pulley side, we still need to put on. So I'm gonna pop over there and take off the passenger side wheel. We're gonna take off the Iabed crank pulley and then put the Autobahn AutoWorks trigger kit on and see how everything lines up. Hopefully the belt still lines up with that kit. But once we get all that done, we can then start planning our routing for our ECU harness. Because without that, we'd kind of be guessing where everything's gonna go. So we got all the main components in, the coil, the TPMS sensor, we'll have the crank sensor put in. And from there, it's basically just some power and grounds and then run everything to their component. So should be fairly straightforward and we can hopefully knock this out pretty soon. All right, so ran into another little weird bit that I don't remember happening before. So the alternator belt on the Iabed kit, normally you're supposed to be able to loosen the alternator lower bolt and then shift the assembly down to loosen the belt. Well, this belt is so tight. I got as much slack as I can out of it and it's just not going anywhere. Here, let me show you. So right here, you can see the belt. I got both bolts almost completely loose. This lower one's completely out. This alternator can only go up and tighten. So unfortunately, what I'm gonna have to do, which I didn't wanna have to do, is pop the bolts out of the pulley and then hopefully be able to shimmy this belt out. We may have to go with a larger belt than what comes in the kit, but we'll cross that bridge once we get to it. All right, so I just grabbed the Autobahn AutoWorks crank pulley and trigger. So now we're gonna see if they're the same number of ribs in the same offset. I mean, this is not the correct way to measure it. It appears to be very close. May have to run a spacer on the pump pulley and the alternator pulley, but I guess I may even have to machine this down a little bit. It's very close. When you're mixing different parts from different manufacturers, this is kind of the stuff you run into, and you can't get upset about it. Just gotta work with it and try to do the best you can. Oh, look at that. Actually, it lines up perfect. So any guys that are out there that are running the Iabed alternator kit for the 16 valve, anyone running that kit can also run this trigger wheel and crank pulley setup because it actually aligns perfectly with no issue. And it even gave us a little bit of slack like we wanted. So I would call that a win. But let's go ahead and grab the sensor. So the sensor itself has to be about 1 millimeter from the face of these teeth. And if I'm not mistaken, it will go over here on this side using these two brackets, or these two provisions. So we may have to build a bracket off of this, but let's see, fingers crossed that the kit itself will come out far enough to meet the teeth. After some fiddling, I was able to get the trigger or crank sensor lined up. Had to run a couple little spacers here behind this bolt, but that's not a permanent solution. I'll end up doing a real nice piece to go back here. Was able to tie that in. I got adjustment here to bring it in and out. Looks like it already fits pretty snug up against it. The harness itself, we're gonna tie up, keep it out of the way of the axle, probably just a P-clamp, and then run it behind the power steering pump over here. But this will at least give us a good baseline of where to run the harness and our links and everything. All right, guys, so we hit yet another snag. Being impatient and just ordering things really quickly, I accidentally ordered a ABA crankcase block off. Only followed my own, so is what it is. Luckily, I can use this for my wife's caddy build, so it's not a total loss, but it just means that I'm gonna have to source out a 16 valve system for it. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and hop back in the car, start taking that lower dash panel down and the center console so we can gain access to that firewall plug and the fuse box, because we're gonna need those to run all our power and ground and everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and hop in the car, get those knocked out, and then I'll show you guys the routing of the harness and what I got planned. I went ahead and got the interior taken apart. We took the lower dash panel down and the center consoles loosened. Fuse box I pulled down just so we could gain access to that firewall plug. So it's not the prettiest right now. You got the fuse box here laying on the ground. The node is down here in the floorboard. It's gonna go into the center console and live there just for easy access to the VGA cable. We got some stuff from the previous swap that we did still in there, so we gotta pull all that out. Make sure everything's nice and capped off so we got no arcing from any wires that we did pull out. Luckily, the no-diz only needs a few components to run. You got crank, you got TPMS, you got the coil, and power and ground. That's about it. We're gonna get started on that next week. Hopefully do like a small, quick little video. I know wiring can be kind of daunting for people, especially when it comes to old school stuff. So I'll kind of show you guys how to go through the stock wiring harness schematics and then relate those to a newer style ECU. But I appreciate you guys watching and following along, and we're gonna get this handled and it's gonna be even better. Thanks.